Good morning. First piece of business this morning will be to talk to Hugh Curtis, the Minister of Finance in the Social Credit Government of Victoria, on the instant supply of $200 million mortgage money at reduced rates, largely for the construction of individual houses in an attempt to pick up the market and pick up employment and pick up housing in British Columbia. Also this morning I'll be talking to my colleague Dale Hicks, BCTV Newshour reporter, who gave you last night that incredible story from Fort Nelson on the 35 instant multimillionaires of the Indian band. A great story with great implications. And later this morning, I'm going to meet my doom at the hands of John Duffy, doctor, psychiatrist, executive director of the Forensic Psychiatric Commission of British Columbia. He's here for a special purpose. I might not be here tomorrow. But straight now to Hugh Curtis on the telephone from Victoria. Mr. Curtis.
How are you?
Mr. Curtis, let me see if I can summarize quickly the basic plan and correct me if I'm wrong. Because of the situation in the province at the moment, in the lumber industry and in the housing industry, and to encourage new starts, you've put out $200 million, of which, roughly speaking, $125 million, though it will be flexible in application, will be for individual home mortgages at 9 3/4%, which will apply to this new housing purchased by individuals, and that 9 3/4% will apply for the next 3 to 3.5 years, correct?
3.5 years, correct.
All right. The balance of the $200 million, and as I say, it's flexible, will be available on a sliding mortgage interest rate, up a little bit from 9 3/4, 10 3/4, and 11 3/4 for the construction of rental accommodation.
That is correct.
All right. Now, let me get down to the individuals, Mr. Curtis, and a couple of questions. What is the maximum price of house which will qualify for an individual getting this very much reduced rate mortgage at 9 3/4%?
$95,000, Jack. 95.
Does that include the cost of the land and the total construction of the house?
Yes, that's the finished package of a serviced lot and a dwelling built on it.
Now, will the individual come to you for the money and build his own house, or will the builders go into action, presumably now, build houses and sell them to the homeowners who will get themselves the mortgages?
No, fundamental to this is that it's not a government-managed program in terms of coming to the Ministry of Lands, Parks and Housing or any other ministry. It is very directly tied with the credit union movement in British Columbia. Therefore, someone who is interested in the program should contact a credit union of their choice anywhere in British Columbia, or failing that, contact BC Central Credit Union in Vancouver. We are making the money available for this mortgage program through the credit unions to people, to the homeowner. I'm speaking of the $125 million program now, to the prospective homeowner and not to the builder. The homeowner will then get in touch, or the prospective homeowner will get in touch with a builder, or they may already have been in touch with a builder in terms of, I'd like to build a house. So it's a credit union program in terms of the availability of the funds being made from...
In other words, it'll be the normal market system. I, as the builder, will have houses available for sale, and I'll be spurred, presumably, by knowing that my potential purchasers can get money through their credit union at 9 3/4%.
Yes, it's important to emphasize, Jack, that the program becomes effective January 15.
Right.
And therefore, it does not apply to housing which has already been constructed or is nearing completion. We are not in a position under this program, because of the very nature of the program, to assist a builder with an inventory of housing. And I appreciate that some of them will be a little unhappy about that. But at least it will stimulate construction. They can move to the construction of new housing, and the inventory will, I'm sure, be taken up. We don't think the inventory is extremely large at the present time.
Now, for instance, if there are a few houses already substantially constructed, and I want to go and buy one of those houses today, I can't get the 9 3/4 money.
That is correct. You cannot.
I cannot get the money. Now,
no.
Back to the overall $95,000. Have you laid down any kind of formula, rigid or otherwise, on what the down payments must or must not be?
No, again, we are going to use the normal market system with the credit union loan manager, with the mortgage departments of the credit unions. analyzing as they do on an everyday basis the capability of the individual applicant. And it's not going to be directed by government, but rather by the experience that is available within credit unions to say, well, we've analyzed these are your indebtedness points, this is your earning expectation, and therefore this is the kind of mortgage we think we can grant you.
In other words, I might be able to make a deal with my credit union for a $20,000 down payment on a $95,000 house, or a $7,000 down payment on a $60,000 house.
Yes, and depending on the capability of the applicant, the family unit, or the individual, that could also involve a second mortgage, a private second mortgage taken out in the marketplace.
What you're doing there for the credit union here is $125 million to begin with. Loan this out with your normal precautions and your normal expertise. And these people who have been residents of British Columbia for 2 years continuous, or have a 5-year residency record prior to that, they can get some of the $125 million at our rate.
That is correct. Incidentally, I think that it's important to understand that many of the negotiations which have gone on, and they started in the Christmas period, it's been an incredible time for us putting all the bits and pieces together, but it's been exciting. The credit unions will receive the money from the government at 8.25%. They're working on a margin which I think anyone would recognize as being very, very narrow. They're working on a 1.5% margin from the money received to the money loaned.
Okay, next very important question. We've had so many variations over the past 10 or 15 years on government assistance to purchase houses. I believe you now have in force the House Purchase Acquisition Act. Now, I always get mixed up in this, but do your best to spell out for me, apart from the low rate money available from the credit union in the normal manner, you might say, what else can I get, if I qualify, from the government to help me buy this house with my 9.25% money?
I think the best way I can answer that, Jack, is that existing Ministry of Housing assistance is available to those who are applying under the new announcement made by the Premier yesterday. Now, that is a $1,000 grant to all first home buyers, or in the event that that first home buyer has a dependent child or children under 19, a $2,500 grant. There are price limits which are lower, they are less than the $95,000 that we have put in for this new program.
To qualify for the 1,000 or the 2,500, you've got to stick to the limits of what is it in the metro areas?
In the two metro areas of Greater Vancouver and Greater Victoria, and in fact stretching up into the Central Fraser Valley, $56,000 is the limit there, and $52,000 in the balance of the province. In addition, again, a program which stays in place and which applies for the applicants under the new program. There is a $5,000 second mortgage. There is no requirement that that be a first home purchased, but the applicant must not have received assistance under HPAA at any previous time.
You can't get both. You can't get both the 1,000 and the 5,000 second mortgage?
I'm sorry?
You cannot get both, the second mortgage on the higher level and the $1,000 HPA grant.
And there are also limits in the second mortgage program. There are limits.
Well, I don't think we should go into too much complications. I'll have to do that with an official sometime so that we can take the time to spell it out. Now, next question.
The important thing is, Jack, that the programs which have been in place
are still in place.
Still in place for someone applying under the new program.
Now, it's got to, my house, or the house that I choose to buy under this program, must be substantially under construction by June the 30th.
Is that correct?
June the 15th.
I'm sorry?
June the 15th, is it?
June 30.
June 30. Substantially under construction, so that it must be finished and complete for occupancy by December 31st of this year.
Yes, it would have to have a certificate of occupancy. The people may not, in fact, have moved in, but a certificate of occupancy ready to move in. And I think that's very important because time is of the essence. As we said yesterday, We want this program to move quickly. We want, nothing would please us more than to know that it's being taken up very, very quickly by people who want to get into housing.
Now, one other condition, of course, is that the builders must use BC lumber and BC plywood.
Yes?
They can't use any imported stuff on these houses.
Well, we're saying the normal amount of BC lumber and BC plywood. Now, there may be some cabinetry for kitchen, bathroom, and so on, which comes from elsewhere in Canada. But the standard conventional amount of BC lumber which is used, the framing, studs, stairways, and so on, plywood, all of that material, we want, and it can very easily be checked, we want to know that that is BC material.
Should be good for about 4,000 mortgages anyway, shouldn't it? Maybe 5,000 mortgages?
Yeah, the arithmetic suggests that that's the sort of thing we're looking at. In the apartments, Jack, just briefly speaking about those, the limit on the finished value of the apartment unit, and here we're speaking again of frame apartments, is $50,000, $50,000 per unit.
That'll include condominium construction, will it?
Yes, it could include condominium. In the case of the owner-occupied program, that could be a townhouse. It could be
duplex.
Any number of things. Duplex will fall under the rental program as with apartments. And in that case, I think again we could get too detailed here, but duplexes are allowed. Modular homes are allowed. That's the what used to be called prefab, but the modular home, and mobile homes which are constructed in British Columbia after January 15th. And again, the registry process is very simple. It can be determined if a mobile home is built before or after January 15th.
I've no doubt the credit unions are going to be swamped. The first inquiries in all instances should be the selection of a potential house and to a credit union for a mortgage.
Yes, I think that time is very important here. The credit unions, I believe, were notified around the province yesterday in terms of, in the initial instance, simply take information from those who call. I'm sure they're going to be very busy, but that, I think, is the kind of, that's the kind of activity we want to see take place.
Mr. Curtis, I'm grateful for your explanation this morning. We'll have more details on the air as they become available.
I don't want to intrude, except to make one other point, which I think is very important. These mortgages are not assumable. Therefore, we've taken the speculative aspect out of the program. For the 3.5 years, that the house cannot be purchased and then sold, flogged at a higher price, if you will. So that's a condition which people are going to have to consider.
Let me just spell that out again. If I get such a house under such a scheme and I get my 9.75% for 3.5 years, I cannot sell that with the reduced mortgage on it during that time whatsoever.
That's correct.
I could sell it, presumably, pay back your mortgage, but whoever bought my house would have to go to the market for the current rate.
They would. They'd have to go to the market for the mortgage at the rate which applies at that time. That is correct.
I'm glad you spelled that out. I should have asked the question first. My thanks to Hugh Curtis, Minister of Finance in the Government of Victoria.
Good to talk to you, Jack.
Thanks, Hugh. Much obliged. Next. I forget, but it's next anyway. Never mind. See you. My sidekick, Brian Coxford, is back in business again, and he's come up with a really human story this morning. A man who was the innocent victim of a shooting caper, a dreadful business. No happy ending, but happier than it might well have been. Watch Brian.
Allan Harkness has been undergoing therapy at the G.F. Strong Rehabilitation Hospital for a year after his near-fatal injury that doctors now say has paralyzed him for life. Al Harkness was a truck driver, an employee of Apex Trucking of Burnaby, the company that moves heavy equipment on trucks like this one, huge turbines for hydro dams in the far north. And when Allan Harkness was crippled in his unfortunate accident, it appeared certain he would never walk or work again.
I got shot. That was out at Cultus Lake over a man being drunk right out of his mind, and that we were in the trailer, and he pulled a revolver out just out of the clear blue sky and shot me.
This a fellow worker, was it? Or?
No, not a guy I worked with. A guy I knew for about a year and a half. He was a blaster, but he was just stoned right out of his mind, and I don't even think he knew he did it, really.
What was the nature of the injury?
Well, the bullet went in on the left-hand side of me. It took one of my kidneys out, it blew it all up. The bullet went into lumbar 2, which is still engaged in my spine, and they can't take it out.
Bullet's still there?
The bullet's still in my back.
Was there just one shot fired?
No, there was 2 shots fired. The second shot just creased my head here and just put a little blood on the side of my head.
So you're, I suppose, lucky to be here then?
Oh, for sure.
Permanently paralyzed, right?
Permanently paralyzed.
What's the prognosis in terms of the medical reports? Do they say you'll be able to walk?
Oh, they say I'll never walk except with braces. I'll wear braces and walk with braces, but I'll never be able to take the braces off to walk.
So what you can look forward to is a wheelchair, braces, or crutches?
That's right, the rest of my life.
Now you're going to get back to work.
Oh, that's for sure. That's been my dream since I got shot.
Al Harkness hasn't let his crippling injury harness his mobility. His Thunderbird car has been specially equipped with hand controls, and he goes about his business as any normal individual would. It's that kind of determination and the goodwill of his employer, Apex Trucking, and partner owner John Loewen, that will enable Al Harkness to go back to work again. His company is spending thousands of its own dollars to redesign one of the big trucks so that Al will be able to, in the near future, take over where he left off before he was shot. And on this day, the employee and employer were going over some of the detail needed to put Al back to work.
The hand control in there and the electric lift on it, then I think we got it beat. That's all we're going to need.
That's right, yeah. Sometime the end of January or so.
Oh, yeah, by the end of January positively, but I hope to be here on my birthday.
Okay.
That'll be my birthday present. Yeah, right on. And they're behind me just 100%. And they're going to rig a truck all up for me, and I hope to be back working by the end of January at the latest.
I understand this is a first.
This is the first of a person doing it, this of my type, being paralyzed.
And what will you be doing?
I'll be driving truck.
Hauling big turbines?
Hauling big turbines and big equipment again. Bridge beams, 168 feet long. You name it, they haul it.
Won't this be a little difficult without the use of your legs? Or?
I don't think so, because I drive car now, and with your hands, you can do as much with your hands as you can with your feet. It's just going to be a case of having to be a little more careful and just be a little more on the ball all the time.
John, what prompted Apex to seems to go out of their way to help an employee like Al? Most companies would probably wash their hands of it.
Well, first of all, Al is still an employee of Apex, so I don't really see why we shouldn't do it. So.
Going to be quite a job to reconvert the cab, and certainly a novel idea anyway.
Well, it's going to be a lot of work to convert it, but I think it's worth it.
This type of challenge is not new to the Harkness family. Al's father-in-law was also a big truck driver back east. And as this magazine article points out, he lost his arm. Doctors sewed it back on, and now he's back truck driving again. The same kind of strong will is also very evident in Al Harkness's character. And with luck, he'll be back driving the big trucks again at the end of the month.
But I think mind over matter, and I got the ambition that I'm going to do it, and I'm going to prove to everybody it can be done. Because so many people think that somebody in a wheelchair is really useless, and we're not useless at all.
A tip of the Webster hat, both to Al Harkness and to his company Apex. It's great to see a story like that with a little bit of a happy ending, isn't it? Next, Dale Hicks, back from Fort Nelson, on the Indian Band and their incredible settlement with the provincial government after the break.
There are many little facets of the story that haven't been told yet, such as, you know, was the...
Dale Hicks, you know well, BCTV Newshour reporter. I could have fallen off my chair at home last night when I saw your report from Fort Nelson. Exactly what?
I could have fallen off my chair when I first heard about it. The figure, $50 million, doesn't sound that great because we're accustomed to tossing around big numbers. But when you say $50 million divided up between 35 families, then you start to understand the implications of it all. It all began a long time ago, and this story will take you through some of the background.
This is Indian land in the northeast corner of the province, home to a small band of 35 families. Standing at the center of the reserve is the new breed of totem pole, a valve to a natural gas well.
Since 1952, we have tried to settle our claims for mineral rights, and after 28 years, we have finally settled it.
In a ceremony at the Fort Nelson courthouse, the dispute ends. Half the gas profits are signed over to the band, and Chief George Behn accepts.
To the white people of British Columbia, we say this money is not a gift, it is a settlement.
Band members show no emotion, even though they have just become the richest Indians in the country. They are, to all appearances, unimpressed with the monies involved. Monies that begin with the immediate retroactive payment of $12.5 million.
$12.5 million for 35 families. The interest alone would give every family a monthly income of $4,000 in perpetuity. And that's only the retroactive payment. Before the gas wells run dry, the total will exceed $50 million. It is a sum to boggle the mind, especially for these people who, for generations, have lived the quiet life on the banks of the Musquaw River.
The old village is abandoned now, all traces of its Indian past obliterated. Among the relics stands the church, built in 1942 when white men first settled in the region.
All along is the flat we came, that's where the Indian lives, and all along up, farther up. And right over here, about maybe 50 feet or so, that's where I grew up. And up on a hill, right behind you there, that's where my parents are buried and my rest of my relatives, up till 1959, and that's when we moved out of here.
A new community was built several miles away on 25,000 acres of land the band claimed as its reserve. That was 28 years ago, and what were extremely modest homes back then are now collapsing shacks. Half the band still lives here. Timber on the reserve was logged off a few years back and sold to a sawmill. The band got $3 million on that deal. The money went into some new housing, but the water supply is inadequate, the sewage disposal is non-existent. These are obvious targets for the band's newfound wealth.
We need a lot of things. For instance, we need more housing, and priority number one is water supply.
Chief Behn takes us on a tour of a wellhead facility, showing them off with all the pride of a new half-owner. For the moment, the battle is over, and he has won. But another battle is in the making. It'll begin when individual band members start asking for their share of the wealth.
Dale, the thing that just staggers my imagination at the moment, the 25,000 acres was chosen when, a few years ago, as an alternate reserve.
Not as an alternate reserve, Jack. If you want to take it quickly through its history, in 1916, the band, as a greater group of Indians in the northern areas, signed a treaty, or they accepted a treaty with the federal government. And they were told at that time that they were entitled to reserve land. But since they were the only people in the area, they had no need to go out and claim anything at that time. Well, the white man started coming in 1942, and by 1952, there were sufficient white people around claiming territory that the Federal Department of Indian Affairs advised the band that they'd better get with it. They'd better pick their land now, or they were going to be out of luck. Well, that was in '52, and they chose their 25,000 acres near the old settlement that you saw in there, not very many miles away. They chose it basically because the northern area of it had great timber stands on it with which they could build log houses, and there was some flat area where they could live, and it had water and creeks and that sort of thing. They chose that area basically because it was good living territory, good trapping territory, and they didn't know about the natural gas.
I mean, they didn't go out looking for land with natural gas on it.
The natural gas wasn't discovered on that property until 1958, 6 years after they had already chosen it.
There never, therefore, has been any argument about the fact that they owned, in effect, the natural gas.
Oh, that's always been the argument. The argument was the land they chose was provincial land, but it was the federal government that was supposed to be giving it to them. And it took a long time for the province to transfer that land to the feds and the feds to the Indians. But when the province transferred the land, they didn't transfer the mineral rights. They said, no, we don't transfer mineral rights to white people when we give them crown land or sell them crown land. We don't do it for the Indians.
How many years has this struggle taken to come up with the settlement that you were at in the courthouse?
28 years.
Who backed the Indians? Did they do it entirely on their own? I mean, did they just put their feet in and say, we're going to get that mineral reserves off this land?
Well, that's the position they took from the beginning. But it wasn't until about 1975, long time after the oil companies had discovered natural gas on the property, that the opportunity came for them to push hard. Quintana Oil had a productive well on the property, and they had allowed their access rights to lapse. They couldn't get on to the property, therefore, to service their wellhead. The Indians said, make a deal with us, and we'll give you the access rights, but in the meantime, the monies you give us for these access rights, which were actually some kind of a royalty payment, we'll pay back to you if we win our fight with the government. So in other words, Quintana financed the Indians' legal fight with the provincial government.
Now we come to the point. How much did you say a month on the retroactive payments if you divvied it up right now?
Oh, just on the $12.5 million operating at current interest rates, you'd get $4,000 per family every month, and that's just using the interest alone.
35 families. Are they all there, or will other people be coming back as members of the band? I mean,
the band list is settled.
No argument about it?
No argument about it. The band list is settled.
Now, what about the control of the money? Does the band have legal control as a kind of a corporate entity and say, this is how it will be handled? Or is it like city council, decide what it can do with it as it wishes?
It's not quite the federal government treats Indians in its own paternalistic way. They will not allow them to go running off and squandering the money. But in this particular case, in normal cases when Indians come into a great deal of money, the federal government takes it and says it's going into a thing called the Capital Trust account in Ottawa. In other words, the federal government borrows the money from the Indians and pays them a very small interest rate on it compared to what they could get at banks, something currently about 9.25%. In this particular deal, the Indians said it's not going into that Capital Trust account, it's going into regular banks, and it's earning regular interest rates right now. But they can't get it out without the signature of the Indian Affairs Department. So any request they make to them and say, we need some money for such and such a thing, well, the federal government still plays big daddy and says, no, that's something you shouldn't have, or yes, that's a good idea.
Mind you, the federal government isn't nearly as tight as it used to be, and I presume the Indians, if they want to push it, can get total fiscal control of all the money as of now.
Yes, if they pushed hard enough, they could get it all right in their back pocket very quickly.
Good people, obviously, and you can see the concern of the chief. And is he, as I gather from your interviews, really concerned that he wants it to be controlled properly and not to go to the band families to buy, I think you suggested, Cadillacs?
Well, that's, the old image of the rich Oklahoma Indian with the oil rig in the back, the teepee, and he's sitting in front of the teepee and 2 Cadillacs out front. That's always possible, but the chief is trying to avoid that kind of a situation. The younger band members keep saying, things cost money today. They want to get something, they want the money for now, or many of them do. And there's quiet rumblings, internal politics that very few people are allowed to see.
Well, are they likely to use the money actually to build a new township? Are they free to do that now, or have they still got to get the signature of some joker in Epps' department in Ottawa?
Well, the point is that they can now use the money directly to expand the township of the new homes that you saw there.
Right.
And they need desperately to put in good water supply and good sewage disposal systems into that township, plus take out all the old homes and amalgamate them into a complete new community.
But they're bound to get some reasonable amounts of money in their hands to buy decent four-wheel drives, to buy snowmobiles.
Of course. It's almost impossible to squander that much money. I mean, how many four-wheel drives can you buy before the parking lot's full? You'll still have a lot left over.
Do you feel happy for them?
I feel great for them. I think they're going to manage it. I think they'll manage the money well. I don't know how they're going to manage internal strife when it comes to the point where feuds between families start getting down to what they're going to do with the money, how it's going to be divided, what goes into long-term accounts. That's where the problems are going to come.
Well, let's hope it doesn't get down to the level of Vancouver City Council on a smaller scale. I don't think they can ever be that bad.
No.
You'll be keeping an eye on the situation anyway, Dale, eh?
I intend to go back there in some time and see what they've managed to do, see where they've gone with it.
My thanks to Dale Hicks, BCTV Newshour. Next, John Duffy, Executive Director of the Forensic Psychiatric Commission of British Columbia.
Bring that up.
Going to be a disaster. John Duffy, doctor. You're a doctor as well as a psychiatrist.
Yes.
Executive Director of this clumsily titled organization, Forensic. Give me it again.
It's Forensic Psychiatric Services Commission.
Oh, so therefore, what is your spell your job out to me in layman's terms?
To organise the services of psychiatry to the courts in British Columbia.
So therefore, you are involved in the psychiatric examination of all kinds of crimes where a psychiatrist service are deemed to be required.
Yes.
How do we stand in British Columbia? Do we have a backward service or a forward service? Do we have good, humane treatment of people, or do we have old-fashioned snake pit treatment of people?
Well, at the expense of blowing our own trumpet, I think we have the best service in Canada and probably the best service in the continent.
Of people who in need of psychiatric treatment who are in front of the courts?
Yes.
I always get worried when I go to murder trials, because I haven't been for a number of years, mind you, but you're probably still using the McNaughton rule. Is that correct?
Yes, because the Canadian Criminal Code hasn't changed.
And therefore, if I commit an act of murder at a time when I am believed to be insane, even though I'm sane later, I can be found not guilty of murder because of reason of insanity?
Yes.
Should that law still be in existence, or is it completely outdated?
I think it's outdated. I think eventually it will go.
How would you handle it?
I think it's simple that the charge of murder should be proceeded with according to its merits, and after the finding, then the judge should be helped with the disposition of the person.
In other words, but that's back to the Dark Ages, John Duffy. You're saying to me that if I were to commit a murder, which I'm too old to do now, because old people don't commit murders, do they?
Oh, they do.
All right, if I were to commit a murder, and I was seriously mentally disturbed before and after the commission of that act, that I should have to go through a trial, be found guilty because I had done it, and then you would assist, or somebody would assist the judge as to where I should serve my time.
Yeah, I think the thing that you haven't realised, Jack, is that if you were insane at the time of the offence and you were insane now, somebody could easily blame you for the crime. The facts have to be proven. The people have to be satisfied that the act was done by you and no one else. And that's quite a separate duty from what happens to you afterwards. The thing about being found not guilty by reason of insanity is that it's an indeterminate sentence. You can literally be held for the rest of your life. Now, we don't sentence the normal murderer for the rest of his natural life, but we do put away the mentally ill.
For the rest of their natural lives?
Yes, it can be.
In certain circumstances?
Oh, yes.
But then we come to the brighter side of it. I believe that your commission has a distinctly progressive record. Some people still fear that I may commit the most dreadful murders, but due to treatment and whatever, I might be out in a much lesser time than had I been sane at the time of the commission of the crime.
There's no doubt about that. And I don't think there's any reason for anybody to be worried, because I have the responsibility of advising when people should be let out, and there's a board of review of the Attorney General who monitor the patients so that no one's kept in who shouldn't be in.
That's a dreadful responsibility.
Not really. The statistics are very easy.
No, the statistics don't impress the public.
Oh, they should do.
You only need one bad incident of somebody who has been released from forensic psychiatric institution, and your statistics don't mean a damn thing. Am I right?
That's true.
Somebody who's done a murder, been let out, done another murder while in your care, for instance, and then people don't look at the statistics. Give me the statistics.
Well, the point you're making is true, because you're talking about the emotional problem of statistics. And if you realize that I'm dealing with people who are mentally ill and have committed crimes, the patterns are very simple. People who commit acts while they're mentally ill and are then released to the public behave just as though they were mentally ill. That is, they don't repeat the act, and if they ever do appear in a crime, it's usually as a victim. People who have a criminal record before they're mentally ill behave as though they just had a criminal record. So that, for example, someone who bounces checks and after 20 years becomes mentally ill, when they have the mental illness treated, will continue to bounce checks.
You're saying that the pattern of behavior is established regardless?
Yes.
All right, supposing what are the chances, though, of me as an individual, sane, repeating a murder?
Very, very small. Murder's a one-time thing. And I'm using the term murder for the common domestic variety, that is spousal homicide. It's a one-time thing. If we talk about murder and the commission of a crime, that's something else. But that's a tiny percentage of murders, and it's the one that occupies the novelists and Agatha Christie. But it doesn't really occupy society.
In other words, you're saying that a contract killer is something totally different, as you call in your medical way, a spousal homicide.
Yeah.
That means killing a husband or killing a wife in the course of an argument.
Yes.
Yeah. It's and have we many cases in British Columbia where murderers released after treatment have recommitted the offences?
We have none.
None at all?
None. None of the people we've released have committed any crime, with the exception of people we've taken from the prison who became mentally ill in prison, and they've committed such crimes as robbery, car theft.
In other words, a normal pattern of crime which may or may not have been there before their mental illness.
Yep. The real danger of released patients isn't murder at all, it's suicide.
Well, why should that be?
Because they've gone back to the community that doesn't want them.
Community doesn't want people who've been in mental institutions, does it?
It
Or
doesn't.
has the climate improved?
It doesn't like people who've been in mental institutions, and it doesn't like people who kill. And if you're unlucky enough to have both on your record, the community gives you the cold shoulder.
Mind you, we have. Surely the public's attitudes have changed muchly for the better in the past 25 years. I mean, I can remember people being hanged in British Columbia who were as mad as hatters.
True.
We haven't done that for many years, have we?
No. And I think the public's attitudes towards violence have improved enormously. You know, now the media are talking about such things as incest and child battering quite openly. And any society that can tolerate maxi-pads and television can tolerate that.
Say that again?
I said any society that can tolerate maxi-pads and television.
Can tolerate that?
Yeah.
You're saying that a question of taste, bad or good, is as difficult to tolerate as killers released to the public from an institution?
I think it's educational, and I think it's in the broadest sense, an acquaintance with the facts.
Well, looking at society today, I'm not going to ask you how old you are.
You wouldn't dare.
How old are you? How old are you?
I'm not telling.
If you took that beard off, I could make a better guesstimate of it. But the fact remains that, do you think that society in its attitude to morality and ethics has improved or regressed?
I think it's improved.
Hold your breath. Dr. John Duffy, after the break.
Yeah.
I am not very fond of psychiatrist Dr. John Duffy. Can you tell me why I'm not fond of psychiatrists? Is it because when I used to cover murder trials extensively, I'd get one psychiatrist saying one thing for the Crown, saying he's as sane as anything, try him, and another psychiatrist saying he's as right round the bend and he shouldn't be in front of this court. It seemed to me, and this is a hardy old annual I'm putting at you just to annoy you, that you can purchase the psychiatric evidence you require. I'm using that in its broadest sense.
Well, I think that's a fair comment. And I think that should go. And the way that we try to do it in British Columbia is this. We don't conceive of medical advice as belonging to prosecution or defense. It belongs to the court. And I don't think that the situation you're describing is ever found in British Columbia.
I'm out of date again.
Well, not again. You're just out of date here. Because the real concept is that medical evidence should elucidate. It shouldn't be a question of the psychiatrist making up his mind who's guilty or innocent. That's for the court to decide. The only function of the psychiatrist is to try to help the court by clarifying.
Is it not very difficult, though, to decide that? I mean, to be eccentric nowadays. I was in England over Christmas, and in a little village where I was staying, it was quite obvious. There was one wonderful woman. I'm out for a walk on a Sunday morning, and she's going up and down the street, and she's saying, I wonder where the noise is coming from. Always began the mamba, always began the mamba. And this is a true story which happened to me. Matter of fact, it was on Christmas Eve. And I hear this noise in the street, you know. And I thought, good for the English. Eccentric people are still allowed to behave eccentrically in public, and people just smile. We haven't reached that, have we?
We're a very precarious, brittle civilization. It fascinates me that people are so terrified of people that they not only keep their distance physically, but they talk about other people in derogatory terms as kooks or nuts. They don't realize that eccentrics flavor life. Eccentrics are the only really sensible people.
Oh, no, that's just a silly statement. Eccentrics are the only really sensible people.
They're the only sensible people because...
Prove your point, Dr. Duffy. I'm not an eccentric. Oh, am I? Am I an eccentric?
You're asking the question. No,
Am I an eccentric?
No.
I'm in the mold, square.
Yep.
What's an eccentric? Are you an eccentric?
I think so.
How do you show your eccentricism?
Eccentricity.
Eccentricity.
Yes. First of all, by knowing words like eccentricity.
Thank you.
Secondly, by riding motorcycles, sometimes on one wheel.
At your age?
Yeah, well, why are you obsessed with age? You're like Clyde Gilmore.
I'm obsessed with age because I suppose I'm looking down the road and saying, Webster, one of these days you gotta quit. You gotta behave your age instead of running around like a 25-year-old reporter.
Oh, I don't think you should ever behave your age. Ever, ever, ever. You remind me of the classic story of Madame de Stael, who was 80 at the time, and somebody said, I've been sent by a magazine to find out the sexual habits of very old ladies and whether they cease having intercourse. And she said, my dear, you must ask someone much older than me.
De Stael, spelled S-T-A-E-H-L.
No, just S-T-A-E-L.
S-T-A-E-L.
Yes.
Who was
Nothing
she?
about stale.
Who was she?
She was an old wit.
Now, explain though, for me particularly, my particularly gruesome interest in murder. The most enjoyable interview I had all of last year, present company accepted, was with Keith Simpson, the Home Office pathologist from London, England.
Yes.
And I found myself totally engrossed by his somewhat gruesome explanation of some of the famous British and Canadian murder cases. Why does one have this interest?
Well, you live vicariously. You sit at a desk and talk to people, but you don't actually do anything. And it's when you do something that you get a return from it. And most of the success of the novel is because we have a utopian life, an office existence, a 9 to 5. If you talk to people who do things, they rarely read these. So we are gratifying our interest in not only violence, but the interest in outwitting other people.
In other words, I'm trying to lead it because of my normal humdrum existence. I'm trying to brighten up my life by vicariously learning of other people's violence and injuries.
Yes.
That's bad.
Oh no, it's perfectly okay as long as you read about it and don't do it.
If I read about it, am I more inclined to do it?
No, you're less inclined to do it.
Pornography next with Dr. Duffy after the break. Well, nobody, everyone is a creature of their environment. Is that correct, John Duffy?
Yeah.
Pornography. I find it repelling and repulsive. I suppose it comes in waves. It seems to have gone back a little bit now. Should there be total freedom for publication of all pornography, regardless of which sections of our population or which ages it hits?
The only prohibition I would ever put is not on the publication of material, but on the people who are used. And I don't think children should be using pornography. And there's a problem that came up maybe 10, 12 years ago that people aren't really aware of. Kenneth Tynan mentioned it when he mentioned, once you've broken the taboo, you have nothing to hold you. And what happened with pornography was once they had shown all the variations, they went on to the snuff murders. And the snuff murders are where someone is hired to take part in a pornographic film and is then killed on stage, literally. Now, we've substituted violence for sex, and that's the dividing point. That's the one thing that people didn't think would happen when they said there should be no censorship. Because the only certainty in pornography is that the human being is endlessly curious and is endlessly searching for novelties.
But just a minute, I don't quite understand you. Obviously, I agree with you that no child should ever be exploited for the purpose of pornography.
Yeah.
And that should be a serious offence,
Yeah.
for which people should be seriously punished.
Yep.
I thought you might quibble about being seriously punished.
No.
But you're telling me snuff murders, that was in the United States, wasn't it?
In Mexico.
And in Mexico, where these gruesome sexual capers led to the development of a violent attitude to the victims and they were killed.
Yes.
Now, let's talk about punishment for a moment. So therefore you say no restriction on pornography, providing that young people are not used in it.
Yes.
Then you mentioned Kenneth Tynan. Now, Kenneth Tynan was the drama critic and BBC fellow in London, who was the first man to use unashamedly the four-letter word on the air.
Yes.
I don't do it, and I wouldn't allow it to be done because of the taste, my own taste, and the taste and standards of my audience. Am I wrong?
No, I think Kenneth Tynan was only showing the marvellous hypocrisy we have, that we have normal conversations where we use four-letter words, but the minute it goes through electronics, it must be sanitized. And I think he was helpful. I think he was sensible, because he demystified the word.
The bad thing about the use of four-letter words on or off the media is that it degrades the English language, or any other language. Does it not?
Have you ever heard Arabs swear? They've
Yes,
enriched
yes.
their language.
But they swear with a grace and culture that we don't have in that particular field.
Once we've got rid of the four-letter words, then we might develop some wit and expertise.
Oh no, I can insult you without using obscenities.
They're only obscenities because we say they're obscenities. In fact, they're extremely straightforward executive words for body functions.
There you go again, your fancy descriptions of simple things. Very seriously, punishment. I have returned to the old-fashioned school, and you may hate me for this, where I think much of the time we spend rehabilitating prisoners with all our phony social workers and all our phony counselling and all our phony this and that could be put down the drain if we returned, in the case of antisocial criminal acts, to short, sharp sentences, perhaps even with hard labour. Am I right or am I wrong? I don't believe in putting people in jail.
How do you rehabilitate somebody who's a company director who commits a violent crime? He's already got all the rehabilitation potential exhausted. As far as punishment goes, there are several facets you haven't mentioned. There's the need to punish, the need to scapegoat.
Oh, you mean my need to
No,
punish?
no.
Yes, yes, no. I mean, if I see a brutal murder with 10 people lined up and shot, I'm getting to the stage where I think vengeance is mine, Seth, society. I want to repay in kind. Is that uncivilized of me?
Well, it's understandable, but what you should realize is that we can deal with people who commit violence without actually punishing them. The biggest punishment of all is to remove someone from society, but not necessarily to put them in a jail. The criminologists in Canada are talking once again about the old idea of putting people up in the Arctic and let them suffer their own company. But that's a humane way of doing it.
You mean the Russians with Siberia, where there were proper criminals sent to Siberia, weren't doing the wrong thing necessarily?
No, not at all. You see, the Russians believe, and so do most behaviorists, in Pavlovian conditioning, so that the retribution should be as near as possible to the time of the incident. But because of the time to detect and the time to come to trial, it might be 4 or 5 years afterwards. So how can you link the incident and the punishment? And the police, for example, have a very good point when they say that the point system for bad driving is bad because there's no change in the person at the time of arrest or at the time of the incident.
No.
So that we must have Pavlovian principles, and we mustn't put people in prison for non-violent acts, and even for some violent acts that are not repeated, such as murder in the family. That's not a real problem in society. The real problems in society are people who will do it again.
And you can't always find them.
Well, you can define them.
You can't always find them. Right?
Oh, true.
Webster and John, think we should chance a few phone calls?
I think so.
Phone calls to my psychiatrist. He's not really my psychiatrist, but he is a psychiatrist. And he'll give me a secret report on me tomorrow, after the break. Social question. Are you from Glasgow?
Renfrew.
Glasgow.
Glasgow.
You're a colleague of R.D. Lang,
Yes?
the famous psychiatrist.
Yes?
Is he a good man?
Yes?
I'm not sure about that fella. Going to take some phone calls. One. Go ahead to Dr. Duffy, please.
Yes, good morning, Dr. Duffy and Mr.
Morning.
Webster. Could you possibly tell me where a woman who's had sort of a poor child home life, who has written NSF checks, shall we say, periodically to buy things, certain things in her life or to give to her children or whatever, how could one get help who has gone to a psychiatrist, didn't work out, who has gone to social workers, it has not worked out? I have a social worker now who doesn't even call me from 1 year to the next. And I feel I need help and I don't know who to turn to. Could you please tell me where to go?
That's a very unfortunate ending. If the checks are being written because of poverty, that's a welfare question. If the writing of the checks causes you or the other person that you're talking about some anxiety, that's a psychiatric question. And it wasn't clear from your question whether the writing of the checks is causing anxiety or whether it's merely the social condition of the family.
No, it's causing anxiety from myself. I have done it since I was about 13 years old.
Even when you didn't need money?
Right.
Well, it's perfectly possible to treat this by conditioning. And the conditioning might have to go on for a couple of years. And I think you would have to perhaps try a psychologist for this one.
Did you get that through MSA, medical care?
She might get a referral and she might be sent to a university, yes.
Where would you go? I mean, who would you... Okay, what would be a...
Go to your doctor, would you?
Yes,
doctor as
if
well?
you went to your doctor, referred to a psychiatrist and discussed the question of conditioning, he would take it from there.
Ask him about conditioning. Best of luck, my dear.
I have done that.
How old are you now?
43.
You haven't done it for a while, though, have you?
No, not for about 5-10 years.
Oh, well, and you haven't written any checks lately, have you?
Yes, I have.
And you've been caught on them?
I was in 1960.
That's a long while ago. Oh, I don't want to get into too much of your detail. I'd suggest you must go back to the doctor and try again.
Yes?
Okay, my dear. I'm hesitant about phone calls to a person like you because you're, they bare their souls, and sometimes I get a little embarrassed.
But everybody does it all the time.
Do not.
Yes, they do.
No, they don't.
Yes, they think they're not doing it, but they do it.
It's amazing that people who call me, and for many years, they tell the truth, despite what other people think. Go ahead, please.
Hello, Jack Webster.
Yeah.
My question to the doctor is, I would like to know if he thinks they can rehabilitate a man like Mr. Stacy. You know, the fellow in New York that killed 30-odd people and buried him in his basement?
I don't know the person. I've only read one newspaper account, but the short answer is no. There's no possibility as far as I can see it.
So therefore he gets locked up?
Yes.
Not in a prison, though?
Should he be locked up for, like, life or?
For life.
For life, eh?
Yes.
No release, no escape?
Nothing.
Same with the Mansons of the world?
Yes.
Lock them up forever?
Yes.
Good answer, because I agree with you. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I'd like to ask Dr. Duffy a question, or 2 or 3 questions. First, I would like to know how he cures the people who are left behind to mourn the victim of the murder.
Well, that's an excellent question, because we hope to develop a service that will not only deal with the offender, but the victim, the offender's family, and the victim's family. Because your point is first class. The victim's family have to be encouraged how to mourn so that the process is over and so they're free for the first time.
I actually think that you can encourage the victim's family to forget the crime that's been committed against their loved one? Do you actually really think that? Or is that your training that brings that thought on? I would like to ask you this. If you were not a psychiatrist, and if you did not have the training you have, would you yourself have the, shall we say, complete and utter compassionate, the discompassionate attitude towards these people who commit those crimes?
Well, I think you asked the wrong person the question, because it's happened in my family. And I had to learn to mourn. And it's perfectly possible. And the short answer to your question is, of course, I think...
To mourn, didn't you?
Yes, I think that the short answer to your question is, of course you can be helped to mourn. Mourning is a well-known and helpful thing. And society has ignored the victim and the victim's family, and it's time they taught them to mourn. And when you have mourned, you will forget.
You may not forgive.
Here's one person who'll take one hell of a long time to forget. One hell of a long time. Look, I'm just one of many, many people in the same position. You people come on TV, you have your bleeding heart societies, you show a hell of a lot of...
Go on. Take your time, sir. I'm interested.
You're very, very... you have a lot of sorry feelings for the
victim.
But the people who the crime was committed against, and the victims, they're forgotten the day before the trial. They don't even have a say in the trial. They can't utter an opinion in the trial. And so the guy goes before the trial. He was saying the day before he committed the murder, or the hour before he committed it. He was saying the day after he committed it. But he's crazy as hell the day at the trial. And he's turned loose.
Well, obviously something very...
You think this is justice?
Well, first of all, I don't say that someone's insane. This is a process that happens in a court, and a judge and a jury sometimes pronounce the findings.
The thing is, to determine this, you guys go before the court, and just like Mr. Webster said, some of you say, oh no, the guy's crazy. Another part of you say, some other psychiatrist says, oh no, this guy is simply saying there's nothing wrong with him.
But the point you're making, I think we'll get off onto something else if we develop that too much. The point he's making is that the victim's family is often forgotten, ignored, and left to rot after a dreadful offense.
No argument about that.
They're always forgotten.
Best of luck, sir. I'll take a break and then I'll come to long distance. Will you hold on, please, in long distance? Hold on, please. Hold on, please. Back to Dr. John Duffy after the break. Dr. John Duffy is Executive Director of the Forensic Psychiatric Commission, the BC, and a call from Coxford. Go ahead, please.
Good morning. Dr. Duffy, I would like to ask you, I'm certain you are aware of the book called The Myth of Mental Illness, in which the theory is that some people are not really mentally ill, they are only reacting to the way they have been conditioned. And I have 3 questions, so please don't leave me after this first one. And if that is the case, and it often is, I know, where is the fine line in determining whether they are acting according to previous conditioning, their whole life, in other words, or whether they are mentally ill? It must really be difficult. That's my first question.
Well, and not only have I heard of the book, I've read it. And the mistake most people make about this book is to forget that Dr. Zaz mentioned that there are genuine mental illnesses. And he mentioned the classic mental illnesses such as schizophrenia and manic depressive psychosis. But he also mentioned social acting out in the setting of mental illness, and he decried that. And as always happens with a book like this, people forget the message and concentrate on the trivial bit, which is that people can act out. It's relatively straightforward thing for a psychiatrist to diagnose mental illness.
Okay, well, now I'll tell you why I asked you that question, Dr. Duffy.
Yeah.
In a town in which I was living a few years ago, I was a district cub master, and I had 21 cub packs under my jurisdiction. And in going around to them and working with the leaders and the boys, I became aware of the fact that there was one leader who I would want to spend more time with in the next year. I wanted to, in the following year, spend more time with individuals who I thought needed help. And this man really portrayed a good boy attitude, if you can understand what I mean. Whatever I said to him, he just accepted without questioning, and there was too much of a good boy attitude here, and it worried me.
And what happened to him?
What happened was that one night, when his wife was in hospital, he tried to rape a girl in the city park at knife point. And his wallet, he did escape. His wallet was picked up. The police, of course, took him.
But what's your point? That he should have been spotted as a...
He was then, he was examined by a psychiatrist, and they said there was nothing wrong with him. And he was going to be sentenced on that basis. Now, this takes you back to that other man who talks about bleeding hearts, but I knew there was something wrong with this man, so I sat down and I wrote all the things I had noticed about him to the psychiatrist, to his lawyer, and to the court, and on the basis of that, he was sent to the forensic clinic down at the coast. What I am saying to you, Dr. Duffy, is that, in fact, this man, by the way, was...
Now, just a minute. We can't discuss this particular case forever. Here's a woman who spotted a mentally ill person and is unhappy with the way they were treated. Is that what it amounts to?
That's it. I'm afraid, because he was examined by a psychiatrist, and yet when he went down to, when they further examined him, they found he was in trouble.
Okay, but the point I get from you is that if I were schizophrenic, you could diagnose that as a matter of clinical routine. Is that correct?
What this lady's really saying is that she hasn't made the difference between the psychiatrist saying this person is not insane, which is the only thing that the psychiatrist would say in court. He's not suffering from a mental illness. But she was quite right to say the person was in trouble. And there's a great distinction between being insane and not responsible and suffering from trouble. Now, it's perfectly obvious that we can help people like this gentleman, because you've described someone who's over-controlled and doesn't know how to handle anger. And that's a legitimate thing to help.
You get in one sentence for your last question. You took so long on the second piece.
Sorry, I would like to ask Dr. Duffy if he is a Christian.
Yes, I am.
Christian, answer. Yes, he is. Campbell River, go ahead, please.
Yes, I'd like to ask Dr. Duffy a question. I don't know if it'd be a question, but this business of psychiatric help for inmates, prison inmates. I know a fellow here that's an inmate right now that's supposed to have psychiatric help and hasn't gotten any. And he's due to be released in a short time. He's been in for 2 years now, and he still hasn't gotten any help.
How do you know that?
Well, I sponsor the guy on a one-to-one basis as an alcoholic.
And he's been waiting 2 years for psychiatric help, you say, in an institution?
He's an inmate in an institution. I know him personally. I see him.
Okay, is that a question that's answerable, Dr. Duffy?
Yes, perfectly simple. You haven't said what he wants help for, but you mentioned alcoholism. And my answer is this: if he's going to come out into the community now, there's nothing to stop him going to a psychiatrist tomorrow.
Well, the thing is, his sentence was to get psychiatric help every 2 weeks while he was in prison.
Well, you can't be sentenced to get psychiatric help. Someone might have advised this, but without knowing the man, I would say the obvious. Did he ask for it before he went to prison? Did he ask for it in prison? And when somebody saw him, did he offer to collaborate with the treatment?
That's the unanswered questions. Hold on, please. Final segment with Dr. Duffy after the break. You've never sat in on a personal session between psychiatrist and patient before. You are going to do so now. I'm 61 going on 62. I lead a fairly stable lifestyle. Should I carry on like this, or should I change my life because of fear of retirement, say 10 years ahead?
You make the decision now. Are you ever going to retire?
No.
Well, once you've made the decision not to retire, you don't have to change your lifestyle.
But you drive a motorcycle.
Sure.
Which is obviously ridiculous for a man of your age. A high-powered motorcycle. Now, why would you do such a silly thing at your age? Is this not a complete expression of your mental imbalance?
Oh, if I was imbalanced, I'd fall off.
No, don't give me that. I mean, is it not kind of daft for a man of your age to ride a motorbike?
No less a person than Sir Ralph Richardson rides his motorcycle at the age of 82. And there's nothing incongruous about riding motorcycles, because we all might have to do it when the Ayatollah
Why do you do it? You do it for some specific personal satisfaction.
For fun.
You enjoy riding a motorbike?
Love it.
You didn't come this morning on your motorbike, did you?
No, I don't have it equipped with skis.
What else? What are your other hobbies, Doctor?
Telling lies.
You're like me, you lie a lot. Now, what are your other hobbies?
I read a lot. I model.
What? For the Hudson Bay or what?
Oh, no, I make models.
Oh, you make models?
Yeah.
Yes, you have a collection of models?
Yeah.
Quick, remind me.
Tanks and planes.
Oh, you have a frustrated militaristic complex?
Yes.
Why do you do that?
For fun.
You mean tanks?
Yes.
You make models?
Yes.
Working models?
Sometimes, yes.
The planes are...
The planes are static.
Planes are static, they don't fly?
No.
Mind you, you've got the kind of job where you've got lots of time to do that. Anyway. That was an unkind cut. I withdraw that remark. Go ahead, please. You got to brighten up these subjects now and again, and you'll appreciate them.
A little gallows humor.
Gallows humor, yes. Go ahead, please.
Dr. Duffy?
Yes?
Our prisons are literally loaded down with drug addicts. Now, my question is that the BC Alcohol and Drug Commission,
yes,
they state in their brochure that pure use of opiates causes little or no permanent damage, and they make it quite clear that the problems do arise from the lifestyle surrounding the person when they have to obtain these illegal drugs.
Yes.
And my question is, why is time spent on trying to rehabilitate these people when they are aware that it is not the drug that causes the problem, but the lifestyle? And secondly, what was your opinion on compulsory treatment of heroin addicts?
Well, thankfully, my answer is that there is a separate Alcohol and Drugs Commission that is responsible for what it does. And I don't have any opinions on these things because I don't have to deal with them.
Well, if this pure drug causes little or no permanent damage, do you agree that it is the lifestyle that causes the problems?
Yes, that's perfectly true.
It is. And what do you think, say there was, this is just hypothetical, there was for instance, a doctor, a family man, who obtained drugs legally, in other words, didn't have to steal them. Do you think he would be, and he was leading a so-called normal life, would he be any problem to society?
No, but that doesn't mean I agree with everyone having drugs. I'm just answering the question in a short fashion. No, it wouldn't cause them harm.
Do you or do you not believe, Dr. Duffy, that we should have a society so permissive that one can lead any lifestyle they want?
No, you can never have that unless it's a society of one.
That's right.
Oh, Dr. Duffy?
Yes?
Oh, no, I am sorry. I didn't mean at all that, everybody would go around using drugs, because I think exactly the opposite. I think that the majority of people would not run down and, take drugs. I'm talking about people who are already addicted. I do have enough faith in people that they wouldn't be stupid enough, every second person, to run down and get drugs, and I'm talking about people who are already...
You've made your point well. I don't happen to agree with you, caller, on that. I think the encouragement of the decriminalization of drugs creates a climate where it can be used more widespreadly by people who can't make proper judgments.
Yes.
Would you agree?
Agreed.
Thank you. I've enjoyed our session this morning, Dr. Duffy. We haven't solved the problems of the world, and I'm going out now to buy myself a motorbike.
Splendid.
My thanks to Doctor. How are things going up the road?
Splendidly.
How many dolls' houses did you sell this year?
I don't know, Jack. Not as many as last year, though.
If you ever want to sell any, tell me how many you've got. I'll put one on, and we can sell them all at reasonable prices for the benefit of your people down in what we used to call R3.
Yes, splendid.
My thanks to Dr. Duffy. With Linda, after this particular short break. Well, that fat old fart Santa. That was a good program this morning.
Very good.
Hicks was great, Brian was great, Curtis was useful, and John Duffy was, as usual, brilliant. So, tomorrow.
Tomorrow is Vancouver Day. We have Mayor Jack Baldridge, we have Alderman Harry Rankin, and Bruce Erickson.
Bruce Erickson? Who asked Bruce Erickson to come on this program? You know, I can't
did.
stand him most of the time. You mean Erickson's here tomorrow morning?
Yes.
Against my better judgment.
At your invitation.
Separate and apart from Jack Baldridge, who will be on his own after Rankin, 9 a.m. precisely, in the morning.